no.
Can you stand up? Can you stand up?
There's been no discussion, and tomorrow we're going to get some remedy on this, on the constitutionality of the law. I mean, there's the aspect of the individual mandate that we'll hear about tomorrow, and then there's this other aspect here about the freedom of or the separation of church and state. So I know that's since we talked about this, I'd like to hear a little comment back, not on the first part because that's outside of this conversation, but on that sacred separation of church and state that the left has used as as an instrument to basically secularize society, and this is a time for the right to use it, or for basic America to use it for what we think is right. So
I would disagree with the premise that the individual mandate is not really important in terms of what we're talking about today. I mean, I think it is profoundly important that the idea that we either do recognize that we have obligations to each other in terms of the provision of healthcare. This is not my preferred solution. I would have gone with a single-payer system. I mean, this is nuts that we're even doing this. And remember, the whole point of the individual mandate, I mean, tomorrow, if the individual mandate is struck down, who's angry? The insurance companies. They were the ones who insisted on it, because if that is struck down and the rest of the law is standing, they still have to cover pre-existing conditions. They still have to get they're the ones who insisted and signed off on those other provisions because they're getting 40 million new customers. So it will be very, interesting. I'm more interested to see how Governor Romney will react to that phenomenon than President Obama. I think, the scripture tells us, beware of princes. Do not put your trust in princes, right? Isn't that what the psalmist warned? Do not put your trust in princes. In February, the Republicans had a bill that addressed the church's concerns in terms of the conscience exemptions and the rights of the church. And then Mr. Limbaugh called a Georgetown student, Sandra Fluke, a nasty word I'd like not to repeat. And guess what? Within a week, Speaker Boehner pulled the bill. He pulled it because all of a sudden the polling numbers changed. And we got the whole war on woman narrative. And you know what? The bishops can spend as much money, we can have 5 fortnights, but you can't undo the damage that someone like Rush Limbaugh can self-inflict. And the Republicans may or may not be with us on this issue, but the politicians are primarily interested about getting reelected, and if the polling numbers go the wrong way, they're going to do what they did, which is they pulled the bill. It was called the Fortenberry bill. So, tomorrow will be very interesting. I've written 3 editorials based on how it might turn out. I have no inside knowledge how it's going to turn out. But the debate has to, at some point, I mean, it is very important that we deal with this HHS thing, which is not in front of the court tomorrow. The contraception mandate is not going to be, unless they just throw out the whole law, in which case, there's nothing to consider. But it is really important that we as a church, however it turns out tomorrow, reaffirm our commitment to universal access to health care, and that the bill still doesn't go far enough because it does not deal with undocumented workers.
I have a couple of questions if there are no questions, but okay, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I have a question.
Can you stand up?
Yeah. More along the lines of your two points of hope, right? The first, sorry if I understood you correctly, is kind of the younger generations who see see Christian humanism as a better response, right, than most of the responses that are out there. And so first there, I mean, I have a question. I often say to a lot of my friends that it just seems like everything's hit a dead end, kind of like the way in which you describe classical liberalism or liberalism in general, not having a response anymore, particularly to issues of ecology and so on and so forth. And so it seems like we're coming to a point where there isn't another response or a better response than Christianity. Like all of a sudden people are looking at us again because we have hope, right? So that's one thing, and I wanted to ask you to go maybe a little bit further with that, because I think that could be maybe developed a little bit more. The second is more along the lines of Latinos. I had a very interesting experience, which was that in 2007 I went down to Chile, into Santiago, and lived there for about a year. And my first experience was going to Mass there, and no one asking me ever if, because I would go to daily Mass, if I was going to be a priest. I thought that was awesome. Because for the first time, people recognized that it was an okay thing to be Catholic, and that it was more than just, oh, you're going to be a priest or something like this, right? And I felt remarkably free. That's just an example of how free I felt in Chile. And here I was a very American boy raised in very red Central Valley of California. And I remember coming back home and thinking, God, I wish I was back there. And so while I agree with you that there is kind of this new kind of burgeoning culture with Latinos in which there's a culture that's Catholic and authentically so, and there's a lot of means or reason to be hopeful, I disagree because my experience also was at UC Berkeley. And I saw a lot of young Latinos being educated in my classes who I knew in high school who dramatically changed in college because they were fed basically what we're fed, which is that religion is ignorant and this is not a response, and your parents are ignorant, look at them, right? And I saw a lot of my friends turn on their parents not in the way that they loved them, but in the way that they respected them. And so I wonder if these kids don't have anybody to follow, I guess is my question, how is there really a reason for hope? I mean, who does my generation follow? You know, I consider myself a kid with a Latin heart, to be honest, and so I don't understand, you know, how we can place our hope in this kind of culture if we don't have people to follow. Perhaps it has something to do with these Christian theologians that you're speaking of, but perhaps you could elaborate more on hope.
They should follow Lorenzo.
Into perdition.
Do you want to start with that, about the reason for it?
Look, recently, in the past couple of years, I've been more and more coming to this awareness, and that is the temptation of success and the attempt to draw strategies that will bring the success we seek. In this case, what we seek indeed is the greater glory of Christ, that he be known and loved and followed, that the new evangelization bring this change, that many new listening hearts be beating. These are all wonderful desires, wonderful successes, and may we have them, and we can pray for them. But I am more and more convinced that the deepest attitude of the follower of Christ must go deeper and take seriously his words. In the end, you are useless servants. And concentrate on what a wonderful thing that is, how freeing that is, because it is based on the fact that the battle for which we won success has been fought and has been won. It has been won by the risen Christ. And we cannot ever forget that as we deal with the efforts we are in our poverty able to make on evangelization of youth or of old people or anyone. It's just something that really, I feel very strongly about. Because I spent years, Mike knows that, years designing strategies of success, working for cardinals and people like that. Some programs were rejected, those were tried, all kinds came down the pike, beautiful documents, and nothing happened. Well, I don't give up. I'm here. I could say, what's the use of going to these Crossroads activities? No, they are part of my own education in the success of the resurrection of Christ. In that context, indeed, following someone is crucial. But in that context,
I say, to pick up on that, and I think it's profoundly, well, everything Monsignor says is profound. But I remember we had a meeting with these young theologians last September that the Doctrine Committee of the Bishops' Conference had, and Archbishop Gustinoia was asked to speak, and he recalled going when he used to be the head staff director for the Doctrine Committee here, and he said he'd gone out to Seattle or Portland, Oregon, someplace that was, that kind of secularized northwest part of the country, with the lowest church attendance rates for the past 50 years, although they've now been overtaken by northern New England. And he had to talk to a group of hospital administrators about tubal ligation, I think, was the subject.
yeah.
But being a good Dominican, and I see a Dominican in the back, Gus started with the Trinity and the invitation to the divine life in the Trinity that is given to us in the risen Lord and the empty tomb, and worked his way down. And at the end of his speech, the people in the room came up and said, "No one has ever done this to us. No one has ever explained this to us." So I am sure you experienced what you did at Berkeley. These are people who've never been evangelized. And I, was speaking recently to a cardinal who will not be named, and I said, look, this new evangelization has to start at the top. How many of your brother bishops could, if given 5 minutes, a pen and a blank piece of paper, go from the empty tomb to same-sex marriage, the HHS mandate, any of these things? Come on. And I think this is, again, one of the key things that has emerged in this pontificate, is in everything he does, in his theology, in his liturgy, in everything, it is always this turning to Christ, that if we're not doing that, then what are we doing? And as Monsignor said, that what was interesting, this Bundestag speech, was the lack of a reference to Jesus Christ, which was very jarring to me, and it's the kind of question, unfortunately, I don't have the Holy Father's cell phone, and Lorenzo won't give it to me. So but that's what I wouldn't want to ask him. I mean, if we're not, if we, as a churchman, goes before a parliament or a congressional committee, or issues a statement and doesn't invoke Jesus Christ, or as we've seen in some of the comments that in some of the documents and statements over the religious liberty, this isn't a Catholic issue. If it's not a Catholic issue, why are you as a bishop talking about it? If you want to blog about the First Amendment, blog about the First Amendment. But we preach Christ and Him crucified. We don't preach Madison and Hamilton and Washington. So, but I want to be more precise to your question, which is the situation that you encountered at Berkeley, the different cultural situation with Chile. I think we Catholics in this country, for a variety of reasons, have been very lax. I think we look dismissively on the kind of ghetto Catholicism that we had in the 19th century and first half of the 20th century, which was an incredibly vibrant culture. It was a distinctly Catholic culture. It produced some really, first-class art, first-class literature, first-class thought, and we sold it away way too easily. And I think that was a mistake. And I think there is a need for us to get to those Latino students that you had at Berkeley before, and to be a little bit more pushy. I've become much more of a stiff-necked Catholic as I age, and I think we've got to be more pushy and I'm not an advocate of the culture war model of approach, but we have a story to tell, and as Monsignor points out, it's not our story, but we know how the story ends, and compared to what does modernity offer to kids today? A hookup culture? Oh, that's going to make you happy. I mean, the dissatisfaction, you don't have job security anymore. You used to belong to a community. You could work at a mill. You could pay for, support your family, buy a home, have, 3.4 cars and 4.5 kids and 3 dogs and all that. You don't have that anymore when you graduate from college. I think we've got a great story to tell, but we've got to get back to telling it. And when Monsignor was talking, I'll finish with this. One of the most profound things I have heard on the issue of the new evangelization in the last few years was from Archbishop Martin. And he wasn't actually speaking about it. He was just giving an interview about the state of the church in Ireland, which obviously has been on the cross for the past few years. And there's an insight there into how we preach the gospel, is that we have to embrace suffering. And if there's no suffering, chances are it does not come from the Spirit. But he said something, he said, Ireland is the most catechized and least evangelized culture in Europe. Now, this is a very key insight. And I think this is something that we in the Catholic Church have kind of lost our capacity to evangelize. And what I have been attracted to about Monsignor for now, in the 22 years that I've known him, is he evangelizes. He's always evangelizing. He's evangelizing at dinner. He's evangelizing here. He can't help but evangelize. But he does it in a way that is arresting. There's never a culture war approach. There's never, and this is what we need. So, the fact that this is a room full of people who've got other things to do on Wednesday night, in the middle of New York, it's a mustard seed.
Although it may blow up the whole thing you said, but this beginning with the Trinity and ending with, what was it?
Tubal ligation.
The tubal ligation reminds me of one occasion in which I saw Joseph Ratzinger almost choke of laughter, and it was in fact concerning Mr. Schindler, your friend David. He had given a speech no one understood, and beginning with the Trinity and everything else. I don't even know where it landed. So during the break, I went up to Cardinal Ratzinger and I said, "What do you think?" He said, "I'm a bit baffled. I don't think I understand everything." And I said, "Look, to understand David, what you have to know is that you ask him to speak about the problem of Roman traffic, he will begin with intra-Trinitarian, self-giving of one to the other, and about 45, 50 minutes later, he will be in the Piazza Navona." Ratzinger was on the floor. So it is, you can, and I'm very happy to hear that about Gus, to begin that way, and that is a shocker. In fact, in our own movement, we have something like that occur. The early 70s, the Giussani in many ways refounded everything, based on a super flyer that did not discuss any of the concrete problems and issues that were being debated, in which CL participated again and again. And this time he put on the wall was a creed. Essentially it was the creed. And it just brought the house down. I mean, it went through the entire movement, people awakening to the fact that they have been much more involved with issues than with the origin of why do anything. Anyway, you can therefore begin with the Trinity. I'm not attacking that. Or you can do what the Pope does in this speech. There is no question that even though the name of Christ is not mentioned, this is a speech that is possible because of the faith of the Church in Christ. I mean, it's all over the place. Every line says Christ without writing Christ. And I realize that. That's why I was thinking of the hearing womb. It is living within the hearing womb that you shape the listening heart.
Okay, I think that's it for questions. All right, thank you.